Someone may be steering your decisions right now, and the proof is that you would swear it was your own idea. Manipulation almost never feels like manipulation. It feels like choosing. That is exactly why it works. For the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through the real, evidence-based tactics that people use to bend your choices, not movie hypnosis. The quiet, everyday kind, used by salespeople, advertisers, partners, and bosses. By the end, you will be able to feel each one the moment it begins and shut it down with a single question. Keep that promise in mind, because the last tactic is the one that does the most damage, and almost nobody sees it coming. First, throw out the cartoon villain in your head. Most manipulation is not evil masterminds. It is ordinary pressure, aimed at the mental shortcuts your brain uses to save energy. A psychologist named Robert Cialdini spent years going undercover in sales and fundraising to map these shortcuts. He found that a handful of triggers reliably make people say yes, almost on autopilot. Each one is just a tool. A doctor uses them to get you to take your medicine. A con artist uses the very same tool to empty your account. The trigger is neutral. Only the intent behind it changes. So let us walk through them one by one, starting with the oldest one of all. First is reciprocity. When someone gives you something, you feel a quiet pull to give something back. It feels like simple politeness, but it runs much deeper than that. In one study, a waiter who left a single mint with the bill saw his tips rise. 2 mints, and the tips jumped far higher. The free sample at the store, the free trial, the unexpected little gift. None of these are kindness alone. They open a small debt in your mind, and that debt makes the next request much harder to refuse. Charities learned this long ago. That is why a letter arrives with free address labels you never asked for. You did not order the gift, but now a part of you feels that you owe them. Negotiators use a sharper version. They make a big request first, you refuse, then they retreat to a smaller one. That retreat feels like a concession, so now you feel you must concede something back. You agree to the smaller request, which was the real target all along. The second tactic is commitment and consistency. Once you say yes to something small, you feel pressure to stay consistent and to say yes to something bigger. In a classic experiment from 1966, researchers asked homeowners to put a tiny sign in their window supporting safe driving. Almost everyone agreed. Weeks later, they asked those same people to put a huge, ugly billboard on their front lawn. The ones who had said yes to the small sign were far more likely to agree to the billboard too. This is the foot in the door. That first tiny yes quietly rewrites how you see yourself. It is why a salesperson asks easy little questions you will obviously agree with, long before the real pitch ever arrives. The third is social proof. When we are unsure, we simply copy what everyone else is doing. A line outside a restaurant makes it look better than an empty one, even when the food is worse. This is why you see bestseller, most popular, and is chosen by millions plastered onto everything. It is why old comedies added a laugh track, and why a tip jar is seated with a few bills before you ever walk up. Your brain treats the crowd as evidence. If all of these people chose it, it must be safe. Online, this becomes a weapon. Fake reviews, bot followers, and inflated download counts all exist for one reason. They manufacture a crowd that was never really there. And the more uncertain you feel, the more weight you hand to that crowd. Salespeople know that a nervous buyer will follow the herd almost every time. The trouble is, the crowd can be faked, it can be paid, or it can be just as lost and confused as you are. The fourth tactic is authority. We are trained from birth to obey the people who appear to be in charge. A uniform, a title, a confident voice, even a clipboard can quietly switch off your own judgment. The most chilling proof came from Stanley Milgram in the 1960s. Ordinary volunteers were told by a man in a lab coat to give a stranger increasingly painful electric shocks. No threats were ever used, just a calm, firm instruction to please continue. Around 65% of them went all the way to what they believed was a deadly level of shock. They were not monsters. They simply could not bring themselves to defy the authority standing in the room. You do not need a lab coat to use this. A sharp suit, a fancy job title, or just saying the words, "Trust me, I am an expert," can be enough to lower your guard. That same reflex is why a scammer always claims to be calling from the bank, the police, or the tax office. The title does the work. Most people never stop to check whether the authority is even real. Now stop for just a second. Everything so far has been pressure coming from the outside. A gift, a crowd, a uniform. But the most dangerous tactics do not push on you from the outside at all. They reach inside, and they turn your own feelings into the weapon. That is exactly where we are headed next, and it is where ordinary persuasion crosses the line into something much darker. Watch this next part closely, because this is the one that hides itself inside love. But before we get there, one last push from the outside. Scarcity. The moment something feels rare or about to vanish, we suddenly want it far more. Only 2 left in stock. Sale ends at midnight, just for the first 100 people. Deep down, losing the chance feels worse than gaining the item ever felt good. So the fear of missing out shoves you into a fast decision before you have any time to think it through. That ticking countdown timer on the checkout page is rarely real. Refresh the page, and it quietly starts all over again. Limited edition, exclusive offer, while supplies last. Each phrase is engineered to make hesitation feel like a loss. A skilled salesperson does not even need to praise the product. They just need to hint that you might not be allowed to have it. The 5th classic tactic is liking. We say yes to people we like, and we like people who seem similar to us, who praise us, and who seem to like us first. On its own, that is harmless charm. But push it to the extreme and it becomes something called love bombing. Early in a relationship, a manipulator floods you with attention, gifts, and constant affection. It feels like a fairy tale. That flood is not really about love. It is quietly building a debt and a dependency. Because once you are hooked on that warmth, it can be switched off as punishment anytime you step out of line. Then comes the cruelest part. The warmth returns, then vanishes, then returns again with no clear reason. That unpredictable cycle is the same trap that makes gambling so addictive. You keep chasing the high of the good days, and you blame yourself for the bad ones. What felt like the strongest connection of your life slowly becomes a leash. And that brings us to the darkest tactic of all, the one I promised you at the very start, gaslighting. The name comes from an old film in which a husband slowly dims the gas lamps, then insists his wife is imagining it until she begins to doubt her own mind. A gaslighter denies things you clearly remember. They tell you that you are too sensitive, too dramatic, that it simply never happened. Done long enough, you stop trusting your own memory and you start relying on theirs. Researchers even named the pattern that often follows. They call it DARVO: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Confront a manipulator and they deny it, attack you for daring to ask, then act as though they are the real victim. Suddenly you are the one apologizing. That is the line where influence quietly becomes abuse. So how do you actually defend yourself? You do not need to be smarter. You just need 3 simple habits. First, name it. The instant you can label what is happening, this is scarcity, this is the foot in the door, the spell breaks. Pressure loses its grip the moment you can see it clearly. Second, slow it down. Every one of these tactics needs you to act fast, so simply refuse to. I never decide today is a complete and powerful sentence. And third, the key to all of it, ask yourself one question. If there were no gift, no deadline, no crowd, and nobody watching me, would I still choose this? If the honest answer is no, then you already have your answer. Now let me be completely straight with you, because honesty is the whole point of this. These principles are not magic spells, and they do not work on everyone, every single time. The effect sizes vary a great deal depending on the person, the situation, and the culture. Even the famous Milgram experiments have been heavily criticized for how they were run and reported. Persuasion shifts the odds in someone's favor. It does not actually control your mind. Psychology has been through what people call a replication crisis, where famous results turned out to be weaker or harder to repeat than the textbooks claimed. So treat any single dramatic study with healthy caution. And remember this: none of these tools are evil by themselves. The same reciprocity that traps you also builds real friendships. The same authority you fear is what lets a surgeon save your life. The goal was never to become cold and suspicious of everyone you meet. It is simply to choose with your eyes fully open. So let us go back to where we began. Someone may be steering your decisions right now, and you would swear that it was your own idea. The truth is, the only real defense you have is awareness. A manipulator needs you to react. They need the gift to feel like a debt, the crowd to feel like proof, the deadline to feel like panic, and the love to feel like a cage. But the moment you can name the pressure and ask whether you would still choose it freely, you take the wheel back. The decisions were always yours. Now, finally, you get to actually make them. If this changed the way you see the people around you, there is a lot more where it came from. Subscribe, and we will keep pulling back the curtain on the quiet forces that shape what you think, what you feel, and what you do. Because the more clearly you can see the game, the harder you become to play.